It's May 2025, and something really quite startling has just happened. India has pretty much out of nowhere stopped all trade with Pakistan.
Yeah, it's a big move.
A huge move. And look, your first reaction might be, okay, geopolitics, right? But you have to consider the state Pakistan's economy is in.
It's incredibly fragile.
Exactly. It's like, using that analogy we saw, like an anorexic economy suddenly put on a zero-calorie diet. It just makes you stop and think, is this supposed to be some kind of cure, or is it actually going to make a really bad situation and, well, catastrophic?
It's such an asymmetric situation, isn't it? I mean, just before this trade halt, Pakistan's GDP growth was, what, almost nothing.
Yeah.
0.8% in 2024.
Practically stagnant.
Right. And you had unemployment running at 12%. And the really critical number, those foreign reserves, were down to around $4 billion.
$4 billion, which sounds like a lot, maybe, but what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means roughly 6 weeks of import cover.
Yeah.
That's dangerously low. You compare that to India, sitting on, what, $600 billion?
Yeah. $600 billion. It's just worlds apart.
It really highlights just how vulnerable Pakistan was before this happened.
Absolutely. So that's what we're really digging into here.
Yeah.
Is this trade freeze going to somehow stabilize things, or is it just going to push an already struggling economy over the edge? We've been looking into, the history between them, the trade history.
Which has had its ups and downs, to put it mildly.
Oh, definitely. And the immediate effects of this specific decision and, well, the bigger picture implications.
Because it wasn't always like this, was it? Their economic relationship right after partition.
Not at all. If you go back, say, late 40s through to the mid-60s, there was actually quite a bit of trade. You had Lahore's textile mills, a huge part of their industry.
Still is.
Still is, yeah. And back then, heavily reliant on Indian cotton. And think about the food Karachi markets filled with Indian spices, cardamom, turmeric, essentials for Pakistani cooking.
And that's just the official trade. There was always that informal cross-border stuff happening too, smuggling and the like.
Right, but then the wars kept interfering.
Every single time. 48, 65, 71, then Cargill in 99. Each conflict just chipped away at those trade links, making it more and more difficult, more strained.
And then you get this interesting development in 96. India grants Pakistan most favored nation status?
MFN status, yeah. Which sounds grand, but basically means India promised not to charge higher tariffs on Pakistani goods than on goods from anyone else. A standard trade practice, really.
But Pakistan never returned the favor.
Never reciprocated. It's like holding out your hand and just being left hanging.
Yeah.
And that lack of reciprocity, didn't exactly build confidence for the future.
Definitely not. And it set the stage for what happened after the Pulwama attack in 2019. India revoked MFN status.
And slapped on that huge 200% tariff.
200%. So unsurprisingly, bilateral trade, which was already, let's be honest, not massive, maybe $2 billion a year.
Something like that, yeah. Peanuts for India, really, but more significant for Pakistan.
Well, it just collapsed after that tariff.
And you could see the warning signs in Pakistan's economy even before this latest embargo. The lead up in the early 2020s, it wasn't pretty.
No. You had inflation hitting, what, 25% in 2021?
Yeah, and then by 2023, the rupee had devalued by 40% against the dollar. 40%.
That's massive. And remember those almost unbelievable stories? People apparently using tomatoes as currency because the rupee was so unstable?
It sounds wild, but it speaks volumes about just how desperate things were getting. When you start bartering basic goods because you've lost faith in the currency,
it tells you something fundamental is broken.
And then on top of all that, last year, 2024, they had to go back to the IMF for the 23rd time.
23rd.
And those IMF loans, they always come with conditions, right? Austerity, tough reforms. It just shows the difficult spot they were already in. So when India announced this full embargo on May 1st this year, Pakistan really didn't have much of a safety net left.
So this May 2025 embargo, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Officially, New Delhi says national security concerns.
Which is often the catch-all phrase.
It is. But you look deeper, and it feels like a mix of things, right? Geopolitics, definitely. Those ongoing allegations about cross-border terrorism.
Which are always simmering.
Always. And you can't ignore domestic politics either, probably playing a role.
But what's really striking is what goods got blocked and how fast the impacts hit Pakistan. Let's talk cotton first.
Okay, cotton. Huge for them.
Absolutely huge. Their textile sector is about 10% of their GDP. And the key number here is that they rely on India for something like 60% of their raw cotton.
60%. That's a massive dependency.
It's a critical vulnerability, that this embargo just completely exposed.
And the effect was immediate. Faisalabad, they call it Pakistan's Manchester, right? Full of textile mills.
Yeah, reports are saying factories there are running at maybe 30% capacity now, just crippled.
And you're seeing protests from workers, placards saying things like, no cotton, no pay, will starve either way. It's desperate stuff.
It really brings home the immediate human cost. And look at the alternatives they're scrambling for. Cotton from Vietnam, apparently 50% more expensive.
Ouch. That kills margins.
Completely. And then there's this story about getting cotton from Iran, supposedly organic, but apparently it comes mixed with quite a bit of sand.
Sand? How do you even process that?
Exactly. So higher cost, lower quality. It's a double whammy for their biggest industry.
Okay, so that's cotton. What about pharmaceuticals? That sounds even more alarming.
It is. Estimates are that around 40% of Pakistan's generic medicines came from India. We're talking basic, essential stuff. Insulin, antibiotics.
Life-saving drugs.
Absolutely. And the impact. Reports from Karachi hospitals suggest black market prices for these drugs have surged, like 300%.
300%. So people just can't afford them.
Pretty much. There's even this grim joke going around among pharmacists that aspirin now costs more than caviar.
Wow. That kind of dark humor really tells you something about the anxiety levels, doesn't it?
It really does. It points to a fundamental breakdown in access to healthcare. And worse, you hear about people getting desperate, looking online for, like, homemade antibiotic recipes using yogurt or something.
Oh no, that's incredibly dangerous.
It's terrifying. It shows the lengths people are driven to when the formal supply chain collapses.
And it's not just the big industrial stuff or vital medicines. It's hitting everyday life too, right? Spices.
Yeah, India was a huge source of chili powder, turmeric, cumin. The absolute staples of Pakistani cuisine. Think about making biryani without good quality turmeric or chili.
It wouldn't be the same.
Exactly. We saw a quote from a chef in Lahore, Zubair Ahmed, basically saying the food tastes like cardboard now without those Indian spices. It's a cultural hit as well as an economic one. It shows how intertwined things were, even down to the dinner table.
It really does. Now, has Pakistan tried to retaliate in any way?
They have, yes. Though it feels a bit symbolic, maybe. Less impactful, certainly. They've blocked cement exports going to India.
Okay, cement. Does that hurt India much?
Reports suggest it's caused some minor bumps in construction costs, maybe a 15% price difference in some areas near the border. Not insignificant, but not crippling either.
Right. Anything else?
They also stopped exporting dates to India.
Dates.
Okay. Yeah, apparently it caused a bit of a stir in India's dessert industry. We saw a quote from a sweet shop owner in Mumbai, a halwai, saying something like, "No Pakistani dates means no Eid sweets."
Huh. Okay, so some sweet-related anxiety, but again, probably not shifting the economic balance massively.
Not really, especially when you compare it to the impact India's embargo is having, given Pakistan's underlying economic state.
Yeah, let's circle back to that, because you've got this backdrop of, what, nearly 40% inflation?
Crushing inflation.
Yeah.
Plus massive debt, about $130 billion owed to the IMF, China, other lenders.
And that huge currency devaluation just last year. So this trade embargo,
Well,
it's like pulling away one of the last props holding things up.
precisely. It forces businesses over there to find alternatives that are almost always much more expensive, which just feeds back into inflation, squeezes finances even more. It's a vicious cycle.
We saw that case study, didn't we? The spice trader in Karachi, Abdul Rahim.
Yeah, really illustrated the point. Inherited business, relied on India for maybe 70% of his stock.
Right.
Turmeric, chili, all that. Now he's trying to sell Iranian saffron, Turkish chili powder. Says it's lower quality, much more expensive, and his sales plummeted by 80%.
80%? What's he doing?
He started selling candles on the side. His quote was something like, "At least they can't embargo wax."
Oh, man. That's bleak. But it shows the real-world impact.
It does. And that economist in Lahore, Dr. Aisha Malak, her analogy was so vivid.
The one about the curtains.
Yeah. We're not just tightening belts. We're sewing pants out of old curtains. It really captures that sense of desperation and making do with absolutely nothing.
Okay, so the impact on Pakistan is clearly severe. But what about India? You said their economy is much bigger, $3.7 trillion GDP. Surely they can handle this.
On a macro level, yes, India's economy can absorb the loss of trade with Pakistan relatively easily. But that doesn't mean there aren't negative consequences within India.
Right. It's not cost-free for them either.
Definitely not. Think about those Indian cotton farmers we mentioned. They've just lost a $500 million market overnight. That's significant for those specific communities.
$500 million gone, just like that.
Exactly. And you're starting to hear criticism within India, too, people questioning the strategy. Is this actually achieving anything useful? Or is it, strong on symbolism, but maybe weak on actual strategic results?
We heard from that farmer, didn't we, in Gujarat?
Vikram Patel, yeah. Stuck with a whole harvest of cotton he can't sell to Pakistan. Apparently he's having to sell it off cheap as cattle feed.
Cattle feed. What does that do to his income?
He said he's making maybe 10% of what he made last year. Just wiped out. So people are feeling the pain in India too, especially in those border regions and specific sectors.
And what's the official line from Delhi on this? Why take this hit?
Well, the justification we saw from someone in the Prime Minister's office, Rajan Mehta, was about choking off funding for terrorism. Terrorism cannot thrive if we choke its funding.
Okay, that's the security argument.
That's the argument. But the counter-argument, and it's a powerful one, is does this actually stop terrorism? Or does it mainly just punish ordinary Pakistani people who are already struggling immensely?
Yeah, it's that classic question about sanctions and broad economic measures, who really ends up paying the price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings us right back to the human cost, beyond the numbers.
It does, because these aren't just statistics, are they? They're real people, like Abdul, that spice trader at Karachi port.
Looking at containers of Indian turmeric, haldi, that he can't sell now, calling it a heartbreak, that word just sticks with you.
It really does. Or the truck driver, Harpreet Singh, on the Indian side at the Amritsar border.
Yeah, stuck there for weeks now. Can't make his usual runs to Lahore. Losing income, obviously, but he also talked about losing that connection, the stories he used to bring back for his kids.
Those little human links severed.
Severed. And then the pharmacist in Lahore, Mariam Khan.
The story about the wedding ring.
Yeah, having to ration insulin and someone desperately offering their wedding ring to pay for medicine and her asking, "What am I, a pawn shop?" It's just gut-wrenching. It shows the level of desperation.
It absolutely does. So with all this happening, this human drama, this economic turmoil, how's the rest of the world reacting? What are other countries saying or doing?
Well, it's a mixed bag, as you'd expect. China, predictably, is backing Pakistan.
And probably seeing opportunities for themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Stepping in to fill some of the trade gaps, increasing their influence. Then you've got the U.S. doing the usual, calling for dialogue.
Standard diplomatic playbook.
Pretty much. The IMF is apparently gearing up for another loan package for Pakistan, number 24, I guess, which shows the international concern about a complete economic collapse there.
And the EU? Weren't they trying something?
Yeah, they proposed a trade peace summit in Brussels, which led to that slightly surreal detail.
About the waffles.
About the waffles. Apparently, Pakistan asked if Belgian waffles would be on the menu, and India declined the summit invitation anyway, citing scheduling conflicts.
Scheduling conflicts.
Right.
It's almost darkly funny, the contrast between the gravity of the situation and these diplomatic side notes.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then you've even got Russia offering to mediate.
Russia, given their own situation with sanctions.
I know. It's ironic, isn't it? But it just shows how complex the geopolitics are, with everyone trying to position themselves.
It really paints a picture. And does history offer any lessons here? Have we seen this kind of thing before? Trade blockades as political weapons?
Oh, definitely. And the results are often not what the initiator intended. Think about the U.S. embargo on Cuba. Did it achieve its aims? Arguably, it just pushed Cuba closer to the Soviet Union for decades.
Good point. Any other examples?
The blockade against Qatar a few years back by Saudi Arabia and others. Qatar actually proved quite resilient, found new trade routes, boosted domestic production. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, took an economic hit and a bit of a diplomatic black eye.
Interesting. So it can backfire.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
And go further back, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in the U.S. in the 1930s. Many economists believe it worsened the Great Depression by causing global trade to seize up.
So the big lesson from history seems to be careful what you wish for. These things can blow back.
That seems to be it. Economic blockades are blunt instruments. They often hurt the people you maybe don't intend to hurt, and they can have completely unforeseen consequences for the country imposing them too.
Which leads to one of the big potential ironies here, right? India trying to isolate or pressure Pakistan.
Could end up pushing Pakistan even deeper into China's embrace. It's almost a textbook case of potentially playing stupid games, winning stupid prizes, as the saying goes.
While at the same time, as we mentioned, you've got Indian farmers protesting because they can't sell their cotton.
Yeah, that Mumbai economist Sanjay Patel put it quite bluntly. We've swapped trade routes for tweet feuds. Progress.
A fair question. And China's response seems quite strategic.
Very. offering Pakistan that huge $10 billion loan package, supposedly for infrastructure.
But with strings attached, presumably.
Well, the speculation's intense that it comes with increased Chinese leverage or even control over the Qatar port, which is, hugely strategic.
Something India definitely won't be happy about.
Not at all.
Mm.
So, looking ahead, what are the possible ways out of this? Are there any signs of thawing?
Well, there are always rumors, aren't there? Whispers of backchannel talks. Maybe in Dubai?
Dubai often plays that role. And you even hear these odd little details, like reports they discussed ordering biryani but made a point of saying no Indian tomatoes.
Seriously, it's the little things.
It speaks volumes about the mood, doesn't it? There's also talk of mediation by the UAE or Saudi Arabia. Apparently, one condition mentioned, maybe jokingly, maybe not, was no side-eye during the talks.
Okay, well, that sets the bar low.
It does. And beyond the high-level stuff, you're apparently seeing some pressure from below, too. Cross-border traders, business groups on both sides, starting to organize, pushing for things to get back to normal.
Because they're the ones losing out directly.
Exactly. You can almost picture a scene in those hypothetical Dubai talks. India saying, okay, we'll ease up on the spice restrictions if you show us real action on terrorism.
And maybe throw in some of those latest Bollywood DVDs.
Maybe not the DVDs, but it highlights that mix of hard security issues and the everyday economic and cultural ties that are all tangled up in this.
So wrapping this all up, we come back to that core question. This trade halt, is it a cure or is it making things worse?
I think the evidence we've looked at points pretty strongly towards the latter. Pakistan's economy, already on thin ice, is under immense strain. The hardship for ordinary people is undeniable.
And for India.
For India, while the overall economy won't collapse, there are definite economic costs being felt in specific sectors, and the strategic gains look, well, questionable at best. Potentially counterproductive, even if it pushes Pakistan closer to China.
And underlying it all is that human cost. We can't forget that. The spice trader, the truck driver, the pharmacist, the farmers. These decisions have real, tangible, often painful consequences for individuals.
Absolutely. It forces you to question the effectiveness, and maybe even the ethics, of using trade as such a broad political weapon. Maybe, as someone suggested, dialogue, however difficult, is ultimately a better menu than just imposing an economic diet plan on your neighbor.
It echoes that Gandhian idea, doesn't it? Trying to find solutions that don't lead to mutual destruction. It definitely leaves you thinking about the long game here, and whether there might have been, or still might be, a different path forward for both countries.